Stanley Milgram is not your typical social psychologist. Let's go back to the early days. Milgram was born and raised in the Bronx after his parents moved to the United States from Europe before Hitler took power. This was due to his parents' recognition of the widespreading anti-Semitism in Europe. They were Jewish. Thus, they moved to New York. Stanley, as a child, was always interested in science. Stanley was a prestigious student and graduated high school in 3 years instead of 4, and went on to go to study a vast amount of different sciences in college. He also had a wonderful mentor named Gordon Allport, and he was also an assistant to Solomon Asch. Milgram also used a variety of drugs in his youth. These drugs included marijuana, cocaine, peyote, and amphetamines. Later on, he got married and had 2 children.
The area of psychology Milgram worked in was behaviorism, which I am an expert in, as I am Gordon Allport. The area is based on the study of an organism's behavior, which it uses these behaviors to analyze what the organism is thinking and to understand why it acted in a certain way. And they generally believe that the only way to study the mind is to study and analyze behavior, because it's the only outward sign of the mind processes. It's the only way to study it, straight up. Behaviorists study behaviors in order to predict the response of a certain stimulus. Often these experiments are run to better understand the certain reason things happen. For example, Milgram's famous experiment was to explain the atrocities committed by the Nazi soldiers in the Holocaust.
In Milgram's Small World experiment, he sent out 300 letters to cities in the Midwest to subjects all in different towns. In those letters, there was instructions to mail it to an acquaintance who they considered to be closer to a target address in Boston. These letters established a chain, and of the 300 letters, only 3 letters made it to Boston. Of those 3 letters, 2 of them went along the same lines, and the average of all 3 of the letters was 6 people, so that was 6 links in a chain. And this experiment is where people coined the term 6 degrees of separation because of those 6 links in a chain.
Another experiment that Milgram performed was the lost letter experiment, which consisted of Milgram and one of his associates leaving several sealed address letters in a variety of public places. These letters were addressed to various organizations, including Friends of the Nazi Party, the Communist Party, and a medical research institute. Letters were also addressed to a fictional person named Walter Carnap. Most people mailed the letters to Carnap and the Medical Research Institute, but most of the letters to the Nazi Party and the Communist Party were never seen again. The rate of return for the Medical Research Institute was 72%, the personal letter 71%, and 25% for the letters addressed to the Nazi and Communist parties. Most of the letters to the Nazi and Communist parties were opened, 25% of the medical research letters were opened, and 10% of Walter Carnap's letters were opened. And this experiment proved that there is an existing prejudice between different social groups, and it is credible because the subjects don't realize that this is an experiment. Finally, the last experiment I'm going to talk about is Stanley Milgram's most famous, his obedience to authority experiment. I mean, he was inspired to do this by some Nazi officials' excuses that they were only following orders or hurt other people during the Holocaust. And for this experiment, he put an ad out in a newspaper to get experimental subjects, and hired 2 actors for each subject. And he held a rigged draw that selected all the subjects as teachers, and half the actors as students. The other actors pretended to be experimenters. The subjects were told to shock the students, and increasing increments if they answered a question wrong. And every time the subject shocked the student, the actor pretended to writhe as if they were actually being shocked. Across the board, the subjects were shocked, the students passed what would knock an actual person out, and some of them went past a fatal shock. And this was very significant because it explained a lot of massacres and tragedies that occurred in the world, and really scared a lot of people as to what humans will do when faced with an authority figure.
My psychologist has a first name, it's Stanley.
My psychologist has a second name, it's Milgram.
He loves to shock people every day.
And if you ask me why, I'll say,
Because he's crazy.